This is us testing until teleportation. I'm Preeti Mishra. I'm a QA at ThoughtWorks. I have been in ThoughtWorks for a couple of years now. Not just testing, we would talk about teams in general, distributed teams, the whats, the whys, the disadvantages, things that did not work for us, and how we managed to actually implement some of the tools and technologies that have helped us. It's also going to be a very interactive sessions because we both do not like talking much, so we will expect you guys to talk. Yep. So why do you think we do distributed teams? I was on a team where we had around 6 locations, people in 6 other locations. So what is the most common cause to have such teams? So it is a very common symptom, right? So Martin Fowler has a very interesting article on distributed teams. He talks about multi-site teams, satellite workers. So I highly recommend you guys to read that, but that's his blog. So he also talks about trade-offs and advantages of such teams. What we are going to talk here is also why such teams exist and what are we doing about it. So like some of you mentioned, the first and obvious cause is money, right? So cost effectiveness, everyone looks at it. Like David mentioned, $34, $36. We all talk about money all the time. If we are getting something at a dollar rate which is lesser, then why not? We will go for it, right? So that is one of the factors. The next one is globalization. So we have people across all over many locations. I'll share a very interesting story with you guys. We were working for a very large electronics company, and they were rebranding their marketing website. They told us the TV strategy of Brazil is very different from the rest of the world. Now, how is it different? Brazilians are very passionate about their music. So when they're buying a TV, they would look at the audio, they would look at the sound quality instead of the HD or video when they're buying something. So how would we know that if we did not know people in Brazil, right? It's important that you have local people there who would tell you things that sell there. Same for India, right? What do you think sells in India? Discounts, freebies? Yeah, that does sell in India. But how would you know if you weren't here, if you did not know the people in India, right? So that is something you cannot avoid. Let's see some translations. You go to China, you do something new, you want to launch or start up in Brazil, Spain, you don't know the language there. Would you always use Google Translate? That might translate into something offensive, that might translate into something that doesn't make sense, right? So if you had local people there, that would really, really help you, and they would consult you and they would tell you how the translations and language works. Apart from that, think about legal matters. Every state has a different law when you're doing business with them, right? So for that also, we need people in that particular area. And lastly, as you mentioned, 24 hours dev cycles. Who wouldn't want it, right? So let's face it, for all this, distributed teams have become a reality now, and we cannot just do without them.
Yeah, another important thing, as David was saying, that you should never compromise on the people. If you want a right set of talent, you need to be open to get those talent from anywhere in the world, right? So talent is one thing that you need to look out. Another thing is that sometimes the projects are very bigger, complicated, which means even though we have the best talent, we might need it in numbers, right? So if you distribute, so just imagine how many engineering students graduate every year in India. It's huge, right? So if you tap into markets like India and China, where you still get the best talent, but in numbers. So if you are open to distribute, right, you can tap into these markets and avail the best talents that they have.
So yeah, we need distributed teams, we understood. How many of you love working in such a team? No one? Come on. You must love having your devs around the world, waking up early hours. Yeah, even we didn't. So yeah, what happens? What are some of the smells that we did face or we keep facing? Too many assumptions. When people work in silos, they tend to assume a lot of things. Now let me give you an example. Let's say your devs have used prepared statements in code, right? Would the testers still go ahead and do SQL injections test? Isn't that a waste of time? So if you had that conversation with the dev, that when the dev says, hey, you know what, I have already use these kind of code blocks, you need not write tests for that. Consider unit tests, for example. If you go speak to your devs, audit the tests, or sit with them and see what all have been covered in the lower layers, unit, integration, contract level, then in your main functional tests, UI tests, you would avoid all of that and write more meaningful tests. That saves a lot of time, not just writing and maintaining them, but also on the CI, right? When your build pipelines are green or red. So yeah, that is too many assumptions. Let's see this. Let's say you're driving and somebody hit your car from behind, okay? How would you feel about it? You would get out and slap that person? I'm sure most of you would. Now when you get out, you see that's your mother. She's learning to drive.
Your reaction changes.
Your reaction immediately changes, right? So then if you have empathy, if you have those relations with everyone in your team, you tend to become more sympathetic, you tend to understand why they did what they did, and hence it helps you work much, much better. Distributed teams have over-reliance on reports and metrics. So for instance, we do send out end-of-day status emails to our managers many times, right? And what is that end-of-day email? We copy the yesterday's thing, we change a few numbers, and then we send it. That is a very manual process that we are doing every single day. And our managers need it because they think they cannot control what they can't measure. So every day that becomes a process, and you put a couple of people in the to line of your email. How many of those people really sit till the end of day to see what you've done? So is it not a waste that even you are doing and it's going into the inboxes of many people? So do we really need this? Let's see.
And when working in silos, especially when we work in a distributed environment, people tend to adapt to passive attitude. What does that mean is, a lot of times when you are blocked on something, you send email to right people, and then people generally sit back saying, I have done my job, I have reported that, now I sit back until I get the reply from the person, right? So this is like an anti-pattern because you are blocked, right? You are not thinking enough, you are not innovating, you are not really thinking in different ways what could go wrong. Like for example, being a QA, if I find a defect, right? One way I could do is I just log a bug, okay? Other way is I actually sit, analyze, and understand what's going wrong in the system and provide the right set of information. This helps in a lot of ways, right? So on the same lines, a lot of time it happens that we do not get the right tools that we need. For example, in one of our projects, our client had already invested in one of the tools. They had bought the license for that tool, and they were pushing us to use the same tool since they have invested so much. But if you have a passive attitude and you just accept, then it's like you are not even getting the best results that you want. Instead, if you really go, do a research and see what are the best tools which fit in your context and get a right kind of SWOT that you need, right? So that is something that you should do. Self-interest, so I'll give you an example that in distributed environments, especially if you're working in a multi-vendor setup, people tend to say that nobody should point fingers on our team. So we were working with one of the clients and they had multiple vendors. So when something goes wrong, right, people try to justify, try to defend that nobody points fingers on us, right? So that's there.
Also, you tend to stop innovating. You will feel, why should I take the risk? People will look at me, they'll blame me for things, and then you just keep doing what you're doing and you are there, right there where you were. Yep. So that is also a smell here.
Yeah, and because of all the previous things that we talked about, people do not really trust each other much. They try to become skeptical and cynicism comes a lot. So there are a lot of anti-patterns of distributed testing. These are some of them which we talked about. Now, how do we really get rid of them? What are the things that we do that help us, get better?
Yeah, so these are some of the things that we saw. Is there anything else that you would want to add to this that happens when you're working in such a fashion?
No. Yeah, it went to Bangalore team. They are like that only.
Yes, definitely.
That labeling happens, which is totally destructive to the culture that you have in your organization.
Yeah.
Yep.
Then we don't feel united. We don't feel,
So I work for a French bank, and Yeah. So in the language, it's a problem because I mean, we communicate in English, but in those sites, even that helps. So even people will not really communicate well. So that is one of the other reasons.
Yes, that is a very, very common symptom.
Yep.
We've seen that a lot. So let's talk some of the enablers. Let's see how we can get rid of some of the problems. Not all, I'm sure. This is we do not guarantee we'll get rid of all. But let's discuss what can be done. So we do agree this is a goal, right? The distance is gone. You teleport everyone in one location, and you feel united. You feel you have to basically end the friction that arises between teams because they were distributed and come together as one product and one team. So this is a goal that we ultimately are trying to achieve. So the amount of communication that needs to happen between distributed teams has to be enormous for expectation setting, for people to be on the same page. So it is imperative that we have the communication channels open. Let's see some of the things that we did. So if you see Squiggle. Squiggle was a tool I used on one of my previous projects. So this is what it looks like. If there are 6 people in 6 different locations, it keeps grabbing screens every 15 seconds. And when you want to talk to one of them, you just tap into them. So it's like you're sitting right in front of me. When I want to talk to you, I will call out to you, and then you can start talking. You can tap onto multiple people as well, and then the 3 or 4 of you can have a group conversation. And then there is a common chat where people can send images, send small codes. So it's as if you're all in the same location. So it was really helpful for us because we had a UX dev in Spain, and he used to be on the TV all the time. We had him out there, so we felt like he is with us on the same table, and we used to speak to him. So yeah, that is one of the things that we did. The next is Screen Hero, pair programming. How would you actually pair if you're remote, right? So here, if you see, there are 2 cursors. You get into that machine, you edit a single file, and you both pair, and you both collaborate that way. So then, again, you don't feel that you're remote. If you get on a call, let's say on a call with Screen Hero, it also has some audio and video mechanism. If you club that also, then even the audio thing goes. So apart from that, I seriously recommend companies should invest in their audio and video devices. Many a times we have low audio quality, we have bad internet, so we keep getting disconnected. So all that is very difficult when you're on a call. It is a waste of time for everyone. So once you have those things in place, and not just that, generally keep your video on, so then people connect with each other more. You would know that the person is not WhatsApping while you're speaking, or they're not multitasking you, right? So then you should keep your video on, and that way you feel more connected and more engaged. Then there's this accent problem. So what we did was, we always had a shared, like Google shared WordPad open on the call and shared with everyone. So whatever we were talking, we were also putting it down. So let's say you get disconnected for 5 minutes, or you couldn't understand the accent, you could always read it. And in the end of the meeting, you can send it. So once you do all of these, it does help us. It helped us in many of the meetings.
Yep. And one of the important thing is to have honest communication. What does that mean is, like, there might be a accent problem because of which you do not really understand what the other person is saying. Do not hesitate, stop them then and there. And we used to ask them, sorry, we did not understand the last part, can you please repeat? It's better to stop and get it repeated and understand, rather than having an incorrect understanding, assuming things and going away. And a lot of things that she talked about, right? It was mostly which our team used to use. There can be a client at a distributed location, right? How do you really bridge the gap with the client? So on my current project, what we do is, we had a conversation with the product owner, and he has given us a 30 minutes window every day. So we have a regular call, 30 minutes with him every day. So any doubts that we have throughout the day, we get a good chance of talking to him. It's the whole team who sits and talk to them. So based on what works best for you in your context, you should also see how can you work with clients using some of these tools.
Yeah, this is where we like to hear from you. What have you guys done? Because I'm sure you all have worked, and please tell me you didn't slack then. So what have you done really?
When I first started working with them, they said, hey, can we open up a hero session? It's like, well, that's awesome. A hero's going to come help work with you. I didn't realize it was a tool. So hero sessions are awesome.
Yeah, it is a hero.
Yep.
You have a high quality video cam feed running all the time between these two offices,
Yes.
with
Yeah.
a high quality audio link as well, all the time, which means that if I want to talk to someone over at St. Louis, I just have to go stand in front of that and hey people, or you call out the person and that person can come stand near, then they can talk as if they are talking in front of
I
each
think
other.
that is the best with technology advancements. I'm not sure why we don't do all that. We should be doing that.
Money.
Actually, it was probably a couple years ago when I was at an Agile conference here. I saw what looked like the best setup, which was something like Screen Hero, some way to share the keyboard to do remote pairing. But one of the aspects that I always hated about remote pairing is that I couldn't see body language. But they solved that by having an iPad on each side with the FaceTime, so that they had a channel for body language, and then they had the screen sharing for the computer. So.
That is very essential because you know whether the person understands what you're saying, is with you at all times. Otherwise, it's just one person talking and doing things, and you wouldn't know what the other person is thinking.
Yes,
So yeah, it
and-
is quite
yeah.
important.
And the other thing is, like David was mentioning, occasionally you should let your team travel and meet the clients, meet the people who they are working with. And it can be a small duration, like 2 weeks' time. Maybe Preeti, you can share the story about your experience when you last time traveled.
Yeah, so we had this client who just gave us test cases, okay? I'm a QA, so I got a big Excel sheet. It had 150 test cases. And they said, come on, you can start your work, start running them one by one, and put a pass next to each one. Okay, now I tried to get on calls. I tried to tell them, hey, you know what, it's 150. We can reduce it, we can optimize it. Let me have a look at all of it and try and reduce it. So I actually looked at it, clubbed some, deleted some, and finally I got to, I think, 25 or 30 of them from 150 because they were all a lot of duplicates, a lot of data getting used again and again, which could have been automated as well. So I did that, and I tried to explain, and they freaked out. They said, you cannot reduce it to 30. It's a lot less testing. And luckily, I got to travel at that time. And when I showed them that these are my documented 30 tests, which have everything that you want, they're just optimized, they're just clubbed together. At that time, they really got it, and it helped us save a lot of time, effort, and money, of course, for them. So yeah, that was my...
Tools are something that help team work as a single unit. So if you can see in the diagram, you have multiple sets of tools which integrate very well and hence help deliver, quality software. So if you take a project collaboration, I'll take example of Jira tool, which we used in our past projects. So we had all the story requirements created in a Jira. Anyone, may it be client, BA, devs, or a QA, wants to understand what thing we are working on, they used to just log into Jira and see what are the requirements. QA being like when testing, they can easily refer to all the things. They can comment what are the changes, what are the requirements that we need to test. If they find any defects, they can very well log into the same tool, and they can link it back to the original story. That way you can have a better, later if you see, you have a better tracking of what went wrong in the story. Also, while doing analysis, if you figure out there are some risk involved in this way or this approach, you can also list it down in the card itself. Then another thing, CI tools, like David was mentioning, it's very important that whenever you write code, you integrate frequently. Not only that, you should have tests at different levels, like unit integration, contract, and very few at UI level. You should have them integrated there, and every time that you check in, these tests should at least run, at least a sanity test, which will give you the health of the system, health of the build. If it's failing, you should get to know immediately so that no other dev can, check in on the broken build and mess up the things even more. Yeah. And lastly, we have dashboards. These dashboards can have the CI results, can have the overall testing progress, overall project, how we are doing. So this can be a one place where even though you are distributed, but you know live updates of the project. You have the single picture of the project, what's going on.
Yeah, so this is live internet stats. This is actually the number of internet users, total number of websites. Imagine if you had such data available to you real time every second.
about
That
our
would be
project.
so useful. I mean, this might not be useful to us right now, but in general, in your project, that would be so useful to you if it changes like this, and if it is accurate to this point.
Yep, and if everything is automated, then there are less human errors, which is good for us, right? So one of the CI tools that we were using on our project was Travis CI. That has this functionality. So and in our project, we had a system of like, since everyone was distributed, developer needs to send a pull request, and somebody needs to review it before merging it, right? Because it was distributed time zone difference, it was not always possible to quickly get it reviewed, right? So this plugin helped us in terms of, this plugin actually reviews your code and tells you if it is healthy to merge as is, or if there are any issues, it will give you a warning saying merge with caution or something, and if it is completely breaking, it will not allow the merge. So this was something very, very helpful for us. Next. Travis CI. I think multiple CI tools these days have some of the other plugins which can help you achieve
Yeah, mainly
these
for
goals.
open source projects, when you have people contributing, you don't want them to just check in, right? So they send pull requests, and then you can accept them or reject them. But manually having to do that is a lot of effort if you get 50 pull requests. So if this is doing it for you, then probably it's helpful.
Yep.
Okay, before we move on, how about you guys? Why don't you tell us how you have been utilizing the project management tools or CI tools which have helped you? Did that at least stop the end of day emails when they can see everything is green, the health is good, there are no tests failing?
Yeah, so we have multiple frameworks, and we have each framework is working on multiple tools like Sahi, Selenium, and all the automation tools. Okay, so what we are doing is like whenever any test is executed, we put one entry into one DB. Okay, it's open source like a MariaDB we are using. So we put an entry in the DB. So end of the day, we'll create one dashboard. So anyone wants they'll get the light update. Okay, so how many tests we have executed, what's the pass or fail, and then we'll get the trending report and all. So this is like how we are achieving this.
How do you feel about when people say, "Oh, I don't need a build monitor. We just get the email."
Yeah, so then we automate the emails through Jenkins, which would send them emails. Yeah. So yeah, that is.
Is that a good idea, or is it?
It isn't, but then you can't convince everyone all the time. I mean, you would try, but then if they still want emails, put it in your CI. Your CI will send an automated email every day, and that will serve the purpose.
Yeah, they're going to die because we're checking in
Yeah.
20 times a day. The one that I've sent at a client that we haven't got a chance to do yet is integrating CI like Jenkins with Slack on the chat side. So you actually get to see every time a build succeeds, it actually posts to a Slack channel. So you constantly see it, so that no matter, because you're dispersed, you don't get to have a board. Every time we have on co-located teams, we've got a big CI monitor that we see all the time, and that's actually my job. I walk around and say, "Hey, the build's broke." I add a lot of value to that.
It is, yes.
Yeah,
it
you should put
definitely
your
does.
voice in it. Every time it breaks, it'll automatically say.
Just say that? Yeah. Then I could just go home. They don't need me for anything, right? Exactly. But the integration of they call it actually chat ops, when they're taking a lot of the dev or the operations monitoring things and integrating them with Slack or some other chat tool. That's really the next thing that I want to explore.
So let's see, what would our information radiator, what should it look like? It should be all of these things, right? How many of us know what Pokayoke is? No? Okay. So Pokayoke is basically when you plug in your charger to a socket, you can never go wrong in that, because the design is such that you cannot just put it the other way, right? Let's take the example of a microwave. If you open it in between, the lights go off and it shuts. So now you integrate checks at every point so that there is no scope of manual errors at all. Now let's tie this back to software. If we have those tests, those checks integrated so well that there is no scope of errors at all, that would be an ideal situation, right? So think of it, you are allowed to SSH into all the boxes, your unit, your dev box, your production box, showcase box, everything, okay? And all of them have the same password. So now there might be one morning when you haven't had your coffee and you get into your prod box and you change things, thinking it's your dev box. Now that would mess it up, right? So now how can we avoid it? A, do not give access to anyone. Well, that is difficult. If you do, at least have different passwords. And thirdly, once you get in, probably change the color, the UI, so that you know where you are and you know what you're doing. So that sort of is Pokayok. You integrate those checks at every point and ensure that nobody is messing around with it. Okay, so we have many servers like I spoke about right now. Each time you SSH and you change something, it becomes a different server, right? They're called snowflake servers. Snowflakes are very different from each other. And then you hear things like, hey, it's working on my system, why wouldn't it work on yours? That is a very common thing that we hear on projects. So let's talk about how we can avoid it. What we've used in my previous project was we had dedicated Phoenix servers. Phoenix is rising from the ashes, right? So each time you check in, even config also gets checked in as code. Each time you check in, a new instance is spawned. The server is built from ground up, and every instance is same as the other. Nobody is allowed to SSH and mess around at all. So that is immutable or Phoenix servers. Again, he has a very good blog on that. You can search about it and read about Phoenix servers. It's a very good practice to avoid those symptoms. And basically for analysis also, if you see that problem, something has broken, you would go and see whether the config is same, whether the DB things are same, whether configs, whether code is different. So there's a concept called univariate analysis, where only one variable changes at one time. Let's keep that variable as code probably, or the config, or DB that you changed right now. If that happens, the minute things break, you know what you had changed. You won't have a completely different environment with completely different settings. So that'll help you debug and fix things better. So this is exactly what the picture should look like. Your CI it should be easy to actually spawn servers, one click. Everyone can have their own instances, no matter where you're sitting. You can spawn up a new server based on every check-in, which would have latest code, which would be similar to everything, your automation, your performance tests. Everything should run on very similar Phoenix servers, right? So that way you avoid a lot of config drifts that's happening.
Yep. So far we were talking about all the technical tools, servers, and all of the things that helped us, right? At ThoughtWorks, we have XP practices of Agile. These are some of the practices that really help us solve some of the issues that we had seen in the previous slides. So first one is the IPM. What it is iteration planning meeting. What happens in this is that BA, QA, Dev, and all the other role come together, sit in a room. They go through the backlog, and they see that what all the stories that we can pick up and we should pick up, because the way it makes sense, the priority, and a lot of factors keeping in mind, you decide what to plan. Once you have a set of stories that you want to do next iteration, then we go a little, like in each story we go like what is it exactly that we have to do. List down the task, devs, QAs, all of them add their perspective. Now that you understand a story, a functionality much more better, people also sit and do estimations as in how much time, how much complexity does the story has. So this really helps us, everybody in the team, to have a common understanding of the functionality that we are going to work upon. Yeah. Another thing is the showcase. Like David really mentioned, that one of the key things of XP is you get early feedback. So showcase is something that we do. So the whole iteration you have built something, right? At the end of the iteration, we do this showcase, the functionality that we have developed, to clients. Okay? We actually show them the demo of the working system that we have built. This helps to get the feedback from the client, to validate if we have built the correct things. Also, this gives a sense of achievement to the team who has actually worked upon it. This has multiple advantages. Another thing is, as David already mentioned, retrospective. These are really, really important. So the key thing about retrospective is you trust all the team members that they have done their best based on what skill sets they have, based on what they knew at that point of time. If you have that mindset in place and go in a room, you talk about the things. So you try to answer the questions like, what went well for us, what didn't go well for us, what are the things we need to do differently to improve and do better next time. Yeah? So it revolves around the things, not the people. That's the very important thing here. And so some of the people do go silent, do not speak up. So it's also important that you create a comfortable environment for everyone to be able to voice their opinions. So yeah, apart from this, some of the other practices that we do on almost all the project is we do stand-ups. Stand-up is not to give status updates. It's basically to figure out, if someone on the team is blocked on something and who is the right person in the team who can help them unblock. Yeah? And based on the context, something that we do is, like, we have a team mix of experience, right? Some are freshers, some are experienced. And as David was mentioning, even if the people have 20 years of experience, they still need coaching, right? So we do call a dev huddles or huddle in general. Whenever we are stuck, we are not sure how to proceed, we call up a huddle where all the relevant people come in and discuss about, okay, we have this problem. We have 3 different ways of solutionizing it. What is the best way to go about? So different practices based on the context, we do follow them, which really help us achieve the quality product. Yep.
So yeah, I'm very curious. How many of us actually do these things? Because they might seem very obvious to some of us. They might seem very new to some of us. Oh, that's a good number.
Yep.
Yeah, if not, we highly recommend you start these things. They will open communication channels and they will really, really help you. So work distribution. This is quite important. I don't know why it's in the last. So let's say you have this much scope. It is very important that you guys meet somewhere, not in the sea, somewhere in the middle, and see how much work is, how work can be actually distributed to each of the teams. And you ensure that all the work is taken up by someone, or you'll be just thinking that, 20% of the work maybe team A or team C has, and actually no one has it. So first, divide all the scope, and when I say distribute it, do not split it horizontally. You would never want to do that. Do not give UI to one person, backend to one person, and middleware to one. You have just created so much dependencies between the 3 teams. Instead, try to split it feature-wise. Give payment to somebody if it's a retail website, payment to somebody, browse catalog to someone, and probably put in cart to the 3rd one. So that way they still have some dependencies, but not as much. And while they do, let's say there are features which are dependent. We can't avoid that, right? Payment and, let's say, shopping and choosing has some dependencies. Give it to team B and C or A and B. Do not give it to team A and C. They would have to get up in the middle of the night and then resolve those dependencies, right? So try doing that very intelligently. Try meeting very often at one place, discussing with each other what we have done and what we can do. So cross-pollination is really essential, so that each one knows what's happening at the other end. And finally, when you deliver, it is one product, one feature that you're delivering. So yeah, that was on work distribution. Yeah.
They are interested about the stories or tasks that they have picked up. And so how do the teams come together to see how all their changes together look overall? Is there a way they can collaborate on that?
Sure. So the idea is they meet very often, probably 6 months, 1 year, 2 months, whichever is feasible. If not, they're still working on the same product. They can go into the project collaboration wall that she mentioned and see how the stories are progressing. The walls give us a view. The information radiators give us a view. So they can see what's happening with each of the other teams and how far they've gone, and then see their work as well.
Yep. And if that does not help, maybe you can use some of the communication ways that we have discussed in the past slides to actually, have collaboration and understand things in a better way. It depends what works for you.
UI work where some components they're given to different teams and they sometimes come up with their own color palettes and later then someone has to really sit together and both of them need to get convinced that we need something common to follow.
So I think the trick is when you're meeting, probably you decide the wireframes, you decide what theme you're using and how you want it to look, and then try to get it right. And I'm sure there would still be some differences because they're working in different locations, different areas. But then when you showcase it to each other, when you have a common showcase, then you'll know that we've not drifted that much, and it's still cheaper to come back then rather than in the end.
Yeah.
A front-end development team.
So you mean the distribution according to the work?
Yes. What's your field? Do you have like a test team in India and a front-end team in the US and a back-end team in England?
We feel each one should function as small startups or small, like the concept of microservices, right? Each one should be entirely independent. You should have your own testers there. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yep.
Okay, he is just asking us questions to test us.
It is quite possible that there is something which one feature team is not able to do it by itself. So do you have some kind of communities where the feature team members could you participate in that community and discuss about that problem? And
So very good point. On one of my projects, we had similar situation. What we used to do was, so first thing is while distributing, you look at the skill sets of each team and see what are they good at. Accordingly, you distribute. Second thing is we used to do something called brown bag sessions. So we used to do that once in a week, where every team, every location used to come together 1 hour. They used to talk about, if they need help on something that the other team is expert on. So we used to discuss that, and we used to arrange sessions if required. Like this team will give session to that team, or someone will travel and help them. So this really worked well for us. Any other things that help? Does that help?
So you mentioned about you do the retrospection, right? So at what frequency you do it?
Every iteration.
So how do you execute well the retrospection? You will be seeing what went well and what can be improved. So what is the follow-up you do it on the retrospection?
So there are actually many ways of doing retrospective. Visit a page called Fun Retrospectives. There are different ways, there are different techniques of doing retrospective. Like there are 3L technique, there is some game technique, so multiple hats technique, right? So the end goal is same, that you need to get answers to this question, but you can make it more interesting for people on the team. Just visit the fun retrospective parts. You'll get a lot of ways of running retrospective.
When you do
Oh, okay.
So
All
this
right,
has
we
to
have
be the
action items
Correct,
each
yeah.
time, and the next time before we start the retro, we visit all the action items
Correct.
and we actually strike them if we've done them. Or
Yep.
again, take action items and action owners. So let's say there is an action item on me, I would try to finish it till the next retro because I know they'll open it up again.
Thank you very much, Preeti and Anjali, for the awesome talk.